So welcome back for our second session. I've been asked to talk about something called the silver economy. So this is the roadmap for this session. I'm going to start, like a good academic, to define what we mean by silver economy. What does it mean? We're going to talk about the context of global democratic trends for the silver economy, challenges of a silver economy, and opportunities. So this is a bit of a SWOT analysis. Most of the time, you can look at literature about all the problems with an aging society, and there's another literature that looks at all of the opportunities of an aging society. I'm going to put the two together and talk about both the challenges and the opportunities, give you an example from China, and then again, open to you for any questions or comments that you might have. So, what do we mean when we use the term silver economy? We're talking about the ecosystem of a nation's economy, and it really has production, distribution, and consumption. For the silver economy, we're talking about products and services for people older than 50 years old. So the silver economy focuses on meeting the needs of older people and trying to improve their quality of life. And it's based on the general idea that the aging and elderly have different needs, they have different tastes, and different resources than younger people, so you have a potentially new and lucrative market. Also, the idea is that your senior citizens, your elderly, have a lot of purchasing power, so they can be a major contributor to a nation's growth rate and equitable growth. So when you hear the word silver economy, the term, sometimes people call it the silver market or the mature market. It means the same thing. And it cuts across many different economic sectors in your country, such as ICT, health, finance, transportation, trade, recreation, and tourism. So it's a big market in many different sectors. And technological innovation is a key to the vibrant silver economy. For example, advances in home automation, e-health, robotics, and AI. So why are we so concerned about the silver economy? So we're going to talk about some demographic trends around the world. So if you look at the global share of total world population, the blue line is 65 years or older, and it's going from about 5 or 6% in 1980 to almost 1/5 of the population by 2060. And if you look at the red line, which is 80 years old or more, it's going from about 1% to about 5% of the total population. So the share of the elderly over time, you don't have to be an economist to know that the line is going up, especially the blue line. So they're becoming increasingly more important. And if you look at the world's most aging countries, you have Japan. So this is percentage of the total population over 65 years old. So Japan, it's 28% of the population, Italy, Finland, Portugal, Greece, and so on. But think about Japan. Almost 30% of the population now is 65 or older. I should say that in Thailand, the population is also aging and shrinking. So this is particular relevance for Thailand. So what are the challenges first of a silver economy? It's important to understand that it's great to have a lot of senior citizens. I don't object to supporting older people, but it has some challenges, some economic challenges. When you have an aging and shrinking population like Thailand or China, the case example I'll give you, you have longer expected life expectancy and declining fertility rates. And more older people are living in poverty. Which means that as you have the elderly as a growing share of your population, you have to expand social safety nets, social insurance, and you have rising dependency ratios, which means that you have more and more people who retired living longer and longer, supported by fewer and fewer workers. And if you do the math, if you have fewer people supporting more people for a longer time, you run out of money. As you get older, you have more health challenges. So healthcare as a share of countries' budgets is growing. They're not working, so they're not paying taxes on their earned income. So you have rising expenses for social insurance, for health, for social safety net, and they're not paying in to the funds as workers. So the impact in many countries is your deficit is growing, and then your accumulated deficit, your debt, is also growing. The other thing that makes this especially challenging for governments is that in most countries, the elderly vote. A lot of young people don't vote. The old folks, they vote. So they become electorally, politically very, very important, very powerful. In America, we have something called AARP, which is basically an association of retired people. They are the most feared lobbyists in Washington. When they come in, they represent a large, relatively wealthy, very engaged political force. So it's not just economics, it's the politics of the elderly. So I mentioned life expectancy and fertility. So again, the top line, just as an example, is Japan. And so what you have is light blue, dark blue, green, and what you can see is that the expected life expectancy at age 65 for Japan now is over 90 years old. So your life expectancy at 65 in 1980 in Japan, it was around 80. It's going to go up to about 90. So this just basically shows that people are living longer. And fertility rates, so if you look at that line, the line is what we call the replacement fertility rate, where your population is stable. It's basically 2.1, roughly. If you look at Japan, in 2015, so this is replacement rate. All of these countries are below replacement rate. Thailand is not listed, but they are also well below replacement rate, which means your population is living longer, it's aging, and it's shrinking. That's the main interpretation of that slide. And I said that poverty is increasing among the elderly. So again, if you look at, so this is Korea, for example, and this is China, and poverty risk by age. So this is, the light blue is 66 to 75, the dark blue is over 76. You can tell over time, the longer you live, the greater the risk of slipping into poverty. Basically, your savings run out, maybe the healthcare system can't support it or you can't afford it, and so on. So again, as you get older in all these countries, the risk, so it's kind of sad to think about it. If the longer I live, the greater the risk I will be poor. It makes sense. And poverty risk by gender, the red is woman. So around the world, women tend to live a bit longer than the men. So their risk of getting poor is even greater because, again, if you look at all of these, the red is higher. This is Mexico, Japan, the United States. The black line in the middle is for the whole population. So again, this is just some data to support the idea that people are living longer, populations are shrinking, and there's greater risk of the elderly falling into poverty. This is just the data to support the claims. And if you look at income sources for those over 65 in the G20, so relatively high income countries, you can see, let's look at Japan, public transfers, capital, work. So again, countries like Japan, Singapore are finding ways to employ senior citizens to try to supplement their income, and also it's good for mental health, socialization, and so on. But you can see that over time, the public transfers and occupational transfers, the blues, are growing. I'm looking at this a bit as a public finance perspective. Public pension expenditures. Again, you can see that the black diamonds are 2,000. And so everything above the 2,000, again, if you're looking at the OECD average, look at Italy, France, Japan, bigger and bigger toll on the budget. Same thing for health. So this was for pensions. Everything above the black diamond means it's increasing share of the budget. Same thing with public health. Use my country. United States, increasing. Germany, France, Japan. Switzerland. So Switzerland, very rich country, but it's also population is aging and shrinking. Long care, long-term care. So you have health, but you have long-term care, which is often assisted living. Again, a real challenge. It's a little bit complicated, but this is basically showing that the deficits and debts are rising to try to pay for all of this. I said that they vote, the elderly vote. So if you look at the voting population, the green, let's look at USA. So the green is 16 to 35 years old. The blue is over 55. The main thing here is that the blue, the elderly, voting turnout is much higher than the young. So the US, we're looking at maybe over 80% of the elderly vote versus 60% for the younger folks. So it's not just, there's a great burden on the public sector to try to pay all of the health care and pension costs of the elderly, but they vote. So if you try to cut this, you could lose your job as a politician. So it's a political economy that's important of the elderly. High cost, loud electoral voice. Okay, that's a little depressing. These are challenges. What about the opportunities? And this is kind of how do we take advantage of having this growing elderly population, the opportunities of the silver economy? And this part of the presentation is more optimistic. You have large and increasing purchasing power of the elderly. They have savings. They've accumulated wealth and assets. And as they get older, they dissave. They start spending their savings and selling assets. So this is a great opportunity. You've got a market. If you can figure out what they need and how to beat the market, it could be a driver of your economy. As I said, dissavings. People, instead of saving money, they're taking money out of their savings. And their share of total consumption goes up. And as I said earlier, the elderly tend to have different needs, different tastes, different preferences. So these are new markets. These are markets that you're not taking away from somebody else. In the US, this market is estimated to be over 15 trillion US dollars. So a trillion is 1,000 billion. It's a very big number in dollars. For Thai baht, just multiply it by 37 and it's an even bigger number. Not only do you have this purchasing power, but you've got a source of skilled labor. They're working longer, they have a lot of experience. They might also be able to contribute to the productivity of your economy. This is important especially for high-income countries with substantial worker shortages. And if they're working longer, they have more income to spend. So you get into a virtuous cycle where you can work, you can contribute to the productivity of the economy. With your income, you spend it. And you're creating jobs and markets. So this is a virtuous cycle that you're trying to get into. If you look at share of consumer spending by age group, again, you can see that the seniors, 65 years or older, this line here, you can tell that the numbers are going up as a share all across the chart. These are just numbers to show that they're an increasingly important part of your economy. In the United States, household consumption is 2/3 of our entire economy. I don't know what the number is in Thailand. In Indonesia, it's about 60%. So this is really important from the macro view. The top 10 silver economy markets, the biggest, is in the biggest economy in the world. So if you're looking at spending of the middle and upper class age 65 plus in trillions of US dollars, US here was about 2 trillion. By 2030, it will be over 3 trillion. And look at China. Again, huge potential. So when we talk about the silver economy, it could be a driver in the national economy. Share of consumer spending in the United States, again, don't worry about it, except you can see that 65 years and older is this red line. Woo, up, okay? It's the main takeaway from that chart. So, China case study. In China, as I said, the population is shrinking and aging. The fertility rate has fallen to 1.1. As I said, 2.1 is replacement. So in China, the real question is, are we going to get old before we get rich? Actually similar in Thailand. Number of people over 60 in China are expected to grow from 300 million in 2023 to over 400 million by 2035. That is, they're going to go from about 1/5 of the entire population of China to 1/3 of the entire population of the second most populous country in the world, after India. The UN says globally, we're talking about, for China, 230 million people. In 2024, the silver economy in China was over 1 trillion US dollars, which is 6% of GDP of the entire economy. They expect it to reach 4 trillion US dollars by 2035, about 10% of their economy. And by 2050, it will be 1/3 of the entire economy of China. Think about that in terms of potential. The registration, what they call new silver economy firms, grew by more than 40% in the last, say, 4 or 5 years. So the State Council in China said that we're going to promote a silver economy to improve the well-being of the elderly, and we want to promote businesses to invest in elder-friendly industries such as smart healthcare, personal pensions, tourism. And they want local governments in China to develop services for the elderly, simple things like meal deliveries, at-home healthcare. The problem, again, is a warning that the elderly are also often victims of scams. They're susceptible to scams, and you need, as you see the potential for your workforce, for purchasing power, for contributing to the economy and the well-being of the country, they need stronger consumer protection to protect the elderly from scams.